Cyber weapons are in the hands of states, terrorist groups, criminal groups, and teenagers, right? Most of those, especially the teenagers, don't sign treaties. So if you are going to worry about solving this, you've got to separate out what's just the criminal activity that you're going to prosecute criminally, and then what are the rules, the sort of guidelines, the sort of digital Geneva Convention you're going to create to protect civilians. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether a digital Geneva Convention could work or not. I find it the least bad idea of a series of bad ideas out there about how to go deal with cyber. And the reason I think that it's got at least some legs to it is that while we all know the Geneva Convention itself is not fully enforceable, Bashar Assad wakes up every morning trying to think about how he's going to violate the Geneva Conventions that day, and usually does a pretty good job of it. At least we understand that there is certain behavior that is outside the realm of what we consider to be acceptable. So if we were to put together a list of what it is we would say should be off limits to a cyber attack, we could probably do it over this breakfast pretty quickly. The electric grid, specific communications facilities, emergency responders, and so forth. Places that house the most vulnerable, hospitals, nursing homes, things like that. Election systems. Anybody up there for protecting election systems? Ours are largely protected right now by the fact that they're so old and disconnected from the internet and spread out over 50 states that it actually has created a natural barrier to hackers. But we can't rely on that fully. What's the problem with this? Among those who would probably object vociferously to the creation of a digital Geneva Convention would be our own intelligence agencies. Take election systems off? Well, we understand, I'm sure they'd say, why you'd want to go do that. But who would want to deprive the President of the United States of the ability to go in and say, unseat the next Maduro if they thought that that would be an easier solution than going to war? Power grids? Dig into the book and you'll discover the first big battle plan put together by US Cyber Command. It's called Nitro Zeus. And it is the highly classified program that they developed if we went to war with Iran. This is prior to the 2015 nuclear agreement that President Obama and Secretary Kerry reached with the Iranians, and which I understand has run into some kind of problem lately. But that plan basically called for unplugging all of Tehran, its electric grid, its communication systems, in the first 24 hours of conflict, on the theory that if you actually unplug and completely paralyze a country, you may not have to drop a single bomb. Would a lot of people die? Absolutely. Would fewer people die than if you had to bomb the entire city? Probably yes. So these have raised a whole range of new issues that we are not actually discussing. And we're not discussing it in part because the intelligence community, the military, has wrapped so much secrecy around cyber that we are not having the kind of debate that we had about how to use nuclear weapons. In the nuclear age, everything about how you build nuclear weapons, where you store them, who's got the authority to launch them, that was all classified. But we had a rip-roaring debate about how to go use them, and ended up in a completely different place than it started. You know, MacArthur wanted to drop the bomb on the North Koreans and the Chinese. We now know that General Westmoreland wanted nuclear weapons in case he needed them in Vietnam. We had other cases, including during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where some argued for using nuclear weapons. But by the 1980s, we had had enough public debate that we got to the thought that we would only use nuclear weapons as a matter of national survival. Cyber weapons we're using every day, and others are as well. And we're not having that debate because nobody wants to reveal what our cyber capabilities are, which are quite impressive and quite good. But there's this natural instinct to never discuss it. So to this day, the US government does not acknowledge Olympic Games. In fact, I went through the pleasures of a 4-year-long FBI leak investigation that came out of the Olympic Games stories. It's a really pleasant process to be through. I highly recommend it. That's part of the difficulty, and it's part of the main reason that I wrote The Perfect Weapon, to try to get all of us, and particularly places like Carnegie, which have already engaged in these issues so well, to think anew about how it is that we want to go manage this technology that has gone from a happy world of putting communications together among various people to the predictable unhappy effects of what happens when states begin to adopt it as a weapon.